Welcome to the Heartwork Podcast, where we delve into stories, struggles, and triumphs of entrepreneurship, leadership, and personal growth. I'm Dr. Sarah.
And I'm Dr. Marisa. We're here to guide practitioners, entrepreneurs, leaders, and those just navigating the complexities of life on a journey of discovery that explores the dance between passion and strategy, heart and hustle.
With candid conversations, insightful interviews, and plenty of laughs, get ready to uncover how leading with heart can transform your business and life. Let's dive in. Oh my gosh, you guys. So we have the extraordinary Pablo Giacopelli on today, who we get the privilege of interviewing. You guys have probably heard us talk about this man so much on this podcast. He is our mentor, our coach, a spiritual midwife to both Marisa and I. And Pablo, we are so excited to have you in for the ears of our listeners and their hearts to be able to experience you today. Thanks for being with us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here finally, because we've tried this, 5 times?
I know.
And last time I was sick. I'm so sorry about that. It wasn't on purpose, I promise.
And I had surgery. That wasn't on purpose.
Yeah,
so.
And then you had surgery, and then something happened with you.
Yep.
So here we are. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here with you guys, especially you two guys. I'm very fond of both of you, as you know. And, you're one of the biggest blessings in my life. The fact that I get to walk with you, and the way I've seen both of you grow and discover who you are and embrace your heart, and the way that then has worked for you. And yeah, so it's good to be here.
Yeah, it's so amazing, especially because you were kind of a catalyst in really nudging us to finally do this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
I would love to just share a little bit with our listeners that literally, like Marisa just said, Pablo's been the one that really said, like, hey, let's start this freaking podcast, which is amazing. And I actually remember the first time that I actually got to meet you in person, Pablo, like back in old church days, traveled to the United States. At the time, the pastor that I was a part of a church with had met you through Twitter, had read one of your books. So everybody that's listening, Pablo has written 2 books as well, has many more in his heart reservoir coming as well, which is beautiful.
No pressure.
No pressure. He's just there's something about him. He walks into a room just because of who he is. Everybody is kind of gravitated to him. And I remember that first moment that I was just like, who is this guy? And he's just like sharing on stage. And then
actually, let's tell the truth. You like my perfume, remember?
Oh, that's true. You did smell good.
And it all is revealed.
That's one of the things.
Wow.
That's one of the first things Sarah ever said to me. Pablo, you smell so good.
That's hilarious, because I actually really don't remember that, but that's amazing. Oh, that's so great.
That was the first introduction to you, Sarah. It's like, okay, this is good. She likes the way I smell.
We're peeling it all apart today.
I'm good. Yeah. I've never heard this story the way you've told it every single time, Sarah. This is wonderful.
That's so great. Well, and then you came, how many times did you come to Knoxville? Probably 3, I think, right?
3, 4. I mean, I remember the first time we were at the office where you used to work, where I did that presentation with the leadership team, which everybody in the church seemed to be in.
Yeah.
And then I came back. Yeah, I was there like 4 times. Yeah. 4 or 5 times. Yeah.
Well, so there was just so much beauty that came from that. So I got to experience Pablo from a teaching aspect of things. And then one of the last times that you came, I had the opportunity to actually sit down with you at a coffee shop and just have a conversation. Because this was the point of my life where I had made comments of I feel like something in my life just feels lackluster. I felt left behind. I felt like there was this thing that was just kind of happening that was just, there wasn't fulfillment in a lot of ways. And I had helped grow this church for almost 10 years at this point, had a lot of brilliancy and vibrancy in a lot of aspects of my life. However, there were still a lot of pieces inside of me that were really hurting and not really knowing why or what was going on. And I remember sitting down with you and you used the analogy of looking through a fence and seeing if you look through a fence with a couple holes, you can like look through it. You may see just a piece of it, but you can't see the full picture yet. And you're like, the opportunity of seeing what's going on in somebody's heart, you can kind of see through that. And I know that you have this beautiful gift of seeing through the noise and helping people understand what is actually going on and communicating, helping them communicate what's actually happening for them. And then it transcended into us working together now for 8 years back in May, which was just so freaking wild. So many people have then come from that. And there's been so much transformation, not only for myself and obviously for Marisa as well. And my husband, her husband, like it's just this beautiful rhythm. You work with a lot of chiropractors as well, which is so fun. So I would love to hear, because at the same time, like, I feel like this is also fun because Marisa and I get to ask you questions versus you just ask us questions every day, every time. Because you have also one of the most richest stories. You've traveled the world. You've literally been a pro tennis coach. You've written books. You live in Israel, of goodness sake. You know what I mean? Like, we're literally talking to somebody that lives in Israel right now, y'all. So like, I would love to hear this story because I know what my transformation was and when that kind of moment was. But if you haven't read his book, Holding On Loosely, I would go get it because it literally is just one of the easiest reads, but it's also so transformative. But it kind of talks through your story. So I'd love to kind of hear what was some of the defining moments for you, because you've also had your own transformation journey from what it would look like to succeed per the world, but also now what it looks like to actually live from your heart and know what true transformation looks like.
Yeah, I don't think we have a long time or long enough for me to tell
I don't
you
know.
really everything about my story. I think one of the most important things about my story is that I've spent the majority of my story bleeding life away from my heart. And I was attempting to try and make my life work and somehow heal what was going on within me that I didn't know was going on. Because obviously, this was the product of me leaving home at 12 years old after having a very traumatic relationship with my father, in particularly what would happen to me if I lost tennis matches. And obviously, I didn't succeed at what he had chosen for me to do. So I spent most of my years becoming someone I was not. You know, when I moved to America, my name is Juan Pablo. Obviously, I'm Latin American, and I will never forget going to school there, public school, for the first day, and the teacher called my name Juan Pablo, and from the back, Juan who? Right? What kind of name is that? And again, kids are being kids. People there were called Johnny, Jenny, Harry, Tom, and Sarah, right? Juan Pablo, and so I even had to change my name to try and fit into the new culture that I was basically thrown into by my father in the hope of making a tennis player out of me. So I became Pablo because I hated Juan. I didn't like the sound of it. So I chose Pablo. And today I realize Pablo became my false identity. That's how I then went on to build this image and pretended to be this person that somehow could meet the ocean of expectations that my father had obviously put on me. And essentially, there was just a little boy inside that was bleeding away, and all he wanted was just to be hugged unconditionally and be able to have fun without feeling guilty all the time that he wasn't being productive and he wasn't really, making the mark in the way that he was supposed to or he had been programmed to. Now, my life has taken me. I've lived in 6 different countries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different continents. I've traveled around the world 10 times. I think the only countries I'm missing are Afghanistan, which I have no plans in going to, and maybe something or other here and there. But other than that, the other day we were having a conversation with somebody, and they were talking like, "Hey, Pablo, have you been here?" I go, "Actually, yeah, I have." "You have?" "Yeah, I have." Blah, 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 blah. "Hey, Pablo, have you been here?" I'm like, "Yeah, I have." "You have?" I said, "Yeah." "Dude, you've been everywhere." I said, "Yeah, I have." And that enabled me also to humble my traveling humbled me to be able to understand that I'm not the only one in the world, but there are many different ways to see things. And there are many different perspectives that can be embraced, and it don't have to be wrong just because they don't align with yours. And that enabled me and gave me the gift to be able to better entertain and understand truth, because I'm able to look at things from different angles at the time that they're being talked. Like you said, I ask you a question, right? So when I ask you a question, I've been given a gift that enables me to start seeing the question and the answer you've given me from here, 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 here. And that's why then when I speak into your life, I give you perspective that often is very common. I hear from people I work with, I never saw it like that. I've never even considered that. How did you see that? So for me, that's my gift. And I think a lot of that was activated through my traveling. Now, of course, I was also a professional tennis coach in the women's professional tennis tour, and obviously I became one of the better ones at that. And I was there for 8, 9 years, solid. I was traveling 42 weeks a year. That's how I went around the world in style, really, business class, and staying in 5-star, 6-star hotels, because that's the life you live when you work with a top player. And there I understood a lot about the human heart, the false image, the true image, because I began to understand that one of the reasons the players I worked with, they reached places in the rankings and experienced results that were way beyond their talent level. And that's when I began to understand what's packed inside our hearts. And if we're able to access that, then we essentially become limitless. Right? And as long as we are performing within the context of what our potential, the environment that our potential has been designed for. And so I understood a lot about the tennis court as a mirror. When you walk on the court and you get upset, right? That's the equivalent of you breaking a mirror because you don't like what you see, right? And until we don't realize that life, like a tennis court, is a mirror, we will continue to break the mirrors. Right. And it is only when we begin to realize, well, this is a mirror that is showing me something that I clearly don't like about my life. Right. Then you don't break the mirror, you use it. And so for me, I was able to help my players enter into that place called the zone. But, it was almost like through a pattern of surrender, not entitlement, and I deserve that kind of thing. I should be there. But more a surrender, a humility, where you're then ushered into your heart and you're able to then perform in a way that really, you become limitless and you achieve results that you never even thought were possible. So I understood a lot about my life, the life of others. I understood what it looked like to help people find their hearts, edit their hearts, heal their hearts, right? And so tennis was also, a very instrumental part of my journey. It brought a lot of pain. It brought a lot of suffering in my life. But at the same time, it also brought a lot of redemption, healing, and blessings. Because obviously, in between those two stages or places, my heart was healed. And so I was able to embrace something that I hated at first. And I was able to find a blessing in something that I saw as a curse. Right? And so that transformation is essentially what I now base my work with you guys and professional athletes and CEOs and, whatever.
It's such an incredible story because it's also part of your lived experience, right? So like your experience and your relationship with your own mirrors has shaped the way that you're able to really experience, understand, share, and invite others into looking at their own reflections. So how can you dive deeper into how your relationship with your mirrors has helped you continue to invite other people to look at theirs?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my work always revolves around something I've experienced and I've worked through myself. So in other words, I am smoking what I sell people, right? I do not take anywhere, nor do I introduce or help people in any area or way that I haven't first experienced it in my own life, right? And so one of the benefits of my tennis career is that I saw these results in the life of four different players that were from four different cultural backgrounds, four different talent levels, and four different, if you like, perspectives of how they see life, right? So I learned one of the things that I learned on the tour, which is I think a miracle, is I began to learn how to think like a woman, right? Because I was working with women, and I'm like, well, Pablo, unless you learn how to think like they do, you are going to be having a very hard time explaining anything and getting them to understand what you see as a man, right? So I had to pray very hard, and God helped me, and I actually I don't proclaim to think like a woman because I don't think that's possible unless you're a woman. But I am able to process information and communicate it to women in the way that women are like they feel safe and secure, like they've understood what I said, right? And so for me, my concept, my principles, the things that I believe in and I did, were always the same with each player, but I was able to adapt them so that because of their cultural background, their talent levels, their ability, and their personalities, they were able to benefit from the same things, albeit they were introduced and applied differently. So that gave me an ability to be able to work, whether I work with, I currently have a client that is very high up in the soccer world, right? Or whether I work with a housewife or a stay at home mom, or I work with a professional like you guys or a CEO, or I work with a guy who works in a bank or a guy who sells used cars. It doesn't really matter because everyone has a heart. But everyone also has things in their humanity that means I have to speak to them and introduce things in a different way. Because, of course, there are many things that vary between us, which is one of them is how we learn, how we understand, but also some of the mindsets that we carry because of our cultural background, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, this is something that facilitated my own journey and my own work that I do with myself and also the coach that I have, because I believe every wise person needs to have a coach, right? In tennis, for example, the top players in the world, they always have a coach. And that's the difference between those guys and the guys that are good, right? The great ones always have a coach, and normally it's the same coach throughout their career, right? The consistency of the voice and the work and the rhythm really makes a difference. So, yeah, so this is a little bit of how, I'm able now to see the results that I see in people's lives and the changes, right? Because I'm able to understand from different perspectives, but then I'm able to also package it in a way that the person can receive it and go, okay, I understand this. I can apply this to my life.
You mentioned this a little bit in the beginning, and I feel like this is something that I know was so hard to go into even for myself when I first started working with you. But I feel like we hear a lot of people that are like, I don't even know the difference almost between true identity versus false identity. And you mentioned it in the beginning a little bit of like knowing your true self versus your false self, right? And obviously this could be a whole conversation just talking about false identity. But right. We also Marisa and I literally just this past week got asked the question of, well, so when somebody doesn't know who they are, how do they get to start asking the question of like, who am I? And what do I even start to like think about, invite myself into? And obviously you've worked with a ton of people in the whole true versus false identity. What would be something that you would encourage people that are really wanting to discover more about themselves doing this work?
Well, the reason that we create a false identity in the first place is because normally our lives don't begin within our hearts, right? Because normally the majority of us, we are broken there. And so we then set out to create an identity, which our ego is basically the one in charge of, projecting and sustaining. And the thing with our ego is our ego has no capacity to understand who we are. So it makes it up as it goes along. Now, it's important to understand that that process is simply to help you survive the pain and the bleeding, the inner bleeding that I mentioned, that you are actually doing inside, right? Now, when you don't understand who you are, it requires, work. You need to, first of all, you mentioned at the beginning what I do, right? It's not really a fence. It's the construction sites normally have It is a fence, but it's blacked out. You can't see inside or through it. But they do leave you those little peepholes where if you have the guts to go and put your eye in there, right, you can actually begin to see what's going on inside, albeit in a limited way. So for me, the way I work with my clients is I ask them to tell me their story. And as they're telling me their story, I begin to have these moments where I start to see things in the story. Now, once I get that information, I go back there. And that's where I start, because obviously that enables them to begin to open their hearts and begin to process some of the pain that they otherwise don't know how because it hurts too much, right? As you begin to process your heart, you begin to become aware of someone else. And that someone else is your true self that is inside of you, right? Now, I obviously have a process that I take people through where I invite them to name their false identity, right? So I told you at the beginning, my true self, the God created self, is Juan Pablo. My full self is Pablo. Now, I have understood what it was that I was programmed to want to achieve or do as a child by my father, right? Which was to be famous and rich, basically, right? And there are 9 different ways that we can express our lives. One of those is we want to be powerful and self-reliant. And that definitely, exactly. And that definitely resonated with me. And so for me, my full self was always about being powerful and self-reliant, right? Now, the problem is with each of those 9 things, there's pollution, if you like, right? There is the unhealthy parts. And one of those is you always, in the powerful and self-reliant, is you always need to be against something or someone, right? Because that's where you fight and you argue and you tell and you show, and that's where you then feel powerful and self-reliant because according to you, you're always right. Okay, so one of the ways that I know my full self, Pablo, kept himself alive was he would produce these arguments with me in my mind that I would have about people that I maybe don't like or I had a problem with, right? So I would be having a good time, and then suddenly this person would come to mind, and I would start to argue with this person. And it's like, and eventually I began to understand, I see. So for me now it's very simple. I go, not today, Pablo. No. And so my false identity is, our false identity is something we shed, right? By integrating it into the truth of who we are, right? Our ego is actually something we are given when we are created. There's nothing wrong with our ego. It's how we use it that becomes a problem, right? And so essentially, for most of us, our ego is our CEO and our heart is our COO. And so essentially, the full self, as you begin to deal with it and you begin to shed it and integrate it and bring it to the light, right? Is at the end of the day, your ego becomes the COO and your heart becomes the CEO of your life, right? And then you begin to primarily function from who you truly are. And so your priorities change, why you do what you do, and so forth, right? And so you no longer look for what you need outside and how much money you make or how successful you are. You begin to find all of that within you.
That's really good. I know for myself, like that was probably one of the most just especially in the beginning, when you do this, when you start doing the work, it almost was like so shocking because there was all I knew was my false self, right? And it's like the ego had the highest, I mean, it was the CEO, right? Like it was
you're surviving.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, and you don't know how to go there. And I remember always asking you, well, how do I do this, Pablo? Well, I don't know. Like, how do I go there? What do I do next? You like all those types of stuff. And I remember also one of those times I was working with you and like, I would respond back to you of like, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. And you're like, bullshit. Don't tell me I don't know anymore. You actually know. You just need to get quiet enough with your heart and actually respond, take a moment, respond. And it's wild. Like doing the work actually just gives you the opportunity to get real with yourself at the same time. So
yes.
You mentioned this really quick because I also know this is something I've had to work through, past probably my whole time with you, but really recently. And I know that a lot of just in Maurice and I's world with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of service industry individuals that they're putting themselves first a lot of times before they even take care of themselves, but they're also a lot of times chasing success, money, fame, notoriety. When that is something that is such a forefront of their life, but they don't know how to get out of it. what would be something that you would encourage them with?
Well, each individual situation is different why people do that. I would say that whenever your primary concern is what happens outside of you, it's because you don't understand who you are and you're essentially attempting to build a life that makes sense to you and that somehow works, right? As opposed to obviously focusing much more on what's inside you. Eventually in life, when you go in a certain direction, you will come to a place where you will begin to run out of energy, you will begin to run out of steam, you will begin to realize I have all this success, but inside something's not working. You said that at the beginning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it, people are trying to be good, but life is not about being good. Life is about being real,
Mm.
right? And I think when you're focusing on building an identity outside, you can be anything but real, right? Because every single thing you do is an act. Even in Christianity, you hear people say, you're not acting like a Christian.
Mhm.
And like, since when is being a Christian an act? Right? But this is the reality of how religion works, right? It's how it looks, it's what people think, and not really how it is,
Mm.
right? And if we then think that we can ignore that long enough, somehow we'll feel okay. So we are successful in business, but our relationships are broken. We are able to talk up a storm, but we don't really know who we are,
Mm.
right? We love to talk about rules and regulations and religion, but spiritually, we've never experienced God, right? And so essentially, our lives are out of balance, right? And there are many other disbalances I could go into, but obviously, I'm not going to go to. And so therefore, you have this balance in your life where life just doesn't work for you. Even though you're being successful maybe at what you do, life doesn't work, and it doesn't work, right? Because the happiness, the peace, and the fulfillment that you're looking for, it doesn't really matter what happened. I saw that with my coaching career. The beginning, I was an incredible success, and I was not happy. I was not at peace. I was not fulfilled. And I'm like, well, what else needs to happen here for me to actually be able to feel this, right? And I'm working hard and I'm trying harder all the time, right? If you read Holding On Loosely, that's what it's all about. Trying harder, trying harder, trying harder.
Mm-hmm.
And life is not something we're supposed to be conquering. Life is supposed to be something we receive.
Mm.
The problem is we are so ruled by fear, we think it's never going to come our way. So we have to go out and chase it.
Yeah.
Right? Little do we know that we're chasing something because of the insecurity and the fear that we feel and the exposure that we feel if we can't sit down with a group of people and tell them what we do and how good we are.
What would you say for someone who's starting to find resistance in their life and realize that ego's been driving the bus and is wanting to start to uncover things, want to start digging in the dirt, but is so paralyzed by what they're starting to discover? What would be your invitation for them in moving through that?
When you say resistance, what do you mean by that?
Someone who's just starting to recognize that they are starting to really see that they don't know themselves as well. And when they are trying to live a life fully, experiencing its width, and are just constantly not met with that, and are realizing that they're starting to feel this hole inside and know that they have to go into the emotion in order to really move through and see movement and flow resonate from themselves and resonate from their lives, but are so afraid to really dive in or are starting to uncover things that really do grip them tightly. What would
Yeah.
be an invitation for you or an encouragement of like, this is
Well, I
exactly
think,
the numbers where you
I
need.
would encourage them to find someone to process with and to start talking. Because one of the biggest reasons most people don't do their inner work is because they don't understand what it actually is.
Mm.
A lot of people actually think inner work is some kind of like laboratory experiment that goes on where you have to kind of like, become something you're not or do things you don't want to do. And it's the complete opposite. It's really about finding someone that you feel comfortable with, that you trust, that you can begin to open yourself up and you can begin to process your life, essentially. There's no rocket science to this. There's a lot of people that do what I do, right? And so there isn't a shortage in the world of finding someone to do the work with. At the end of the day, it is clear that not everyone that does what I do has the results I'm seeing, right? And this is not an arrogant thing, but I think it's because a lot of the time, the guys that are doing how I do or what I do that do see the results is because they're living what they're talking about. They're actually, they're eating the food they're feeding other people or helping other people to consider to eat. So this isn't that difficult. You're starting to feel resistance. You're starting to realize something is not working inside. Talk to somebody. Start talking, start processing.
Can you share, because I know I've experienced this with others in my life, but sometimes the difference between someone who may have gone to a very traditional psychiatrist or psychologist and some of the work that you do with individuals, or someone that's really a heart-led inner work coach? Because I mean, you've worked with so many that have shared, wow, like I've gone to therapy or I've talked to other people, but it's never
Yes.
really truly been like this. So can you
Yes.
speak into that? Because sometimes a lot of our audience will say like, well, I am doing the work, or I am talking to someone, once a
Mm.
month, every other week, whatever
Well,
it
it's
may
hard.
be,
Yeah.
right? They're not
Yeah.
experiencing the same level of depth and transformation sometimes in those spaces.
Yeah.
I know you
Well,
have a lot to speak into that.
yeah. Yeah. Look, I'm very transparent when I say that my work very much includes God in it, you know, but not in a religious way, but more in a way that, things happen which no human being can actually facilitate or manufacture. So the way I do my work is I have a gift, right? This is the best way I can describe it. I don't have a technique or I use frameworks and I use things that to guide people, but ultimately my work revolves around, being able to see things and being able to help people see those things, right? And the majority of what goes on in work like this is people talk, someone listens, and the most of the questions they're asked is how does that make you feel? So there's very little perspective given. There is very little options given. The person is never really invited or encouraged to see things in a particular way that may vary from the way they see it, right? I also have no hairs in my tongue. You guys know that. If I see something, I tell you. I am not afraid. One of the reasons I was very successful in my coaching career of 35 years, I'm not afraid of being fired, right? I am not afraid of being fired, meaning, I will tell you something. There were many times where I knew if I tell the tennis player what I need to tell her, she may turn around and tell me, I'm done, Pablo. I don't want to work with you anymore. But I also knew if they were able to sustain what I was giving them, the transformation that it would make, right, was phenomenal. Okay. And so essentially, I always took the chance. And thank God I never got fired for saying something, right? I got fired for other reasons, but not for saying something, right? And so essentially, at the end of the day, I see something and I understand how to introduce it to the person so they're able to make sense of it. For example, I worked with a girl. When this girl came to me, she had been to psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, life coaches. I mean, she had tried the full menu, this girl, right? I mean, I don't think there was anything missing from the menu. And she was still having 6 panic attacks a day. 6 panic attacks a day, right? So for me, I started working with her. Obviously, she was in all kinds of medicine. I'm not going to go into details because I don't like to talk about my clients. I'm very private of what they do. But essentially, for me, it got to the point where I was like, God, unless you help me understand what's going on here and how I can help this person, then I don't think I can go on with this. And it was then that I began to understand. I was given wisdom, if you like, or insight, that a panic attack is simply a physical manifestation when someone enters into a part of their hearts where they're deeply broken. There's a lot of darkness, not because they're evil, but because they can't see. They're blind in that area, and that prevents them from seeing the fact that they are loved. And so therefore they become afraid. And I was given a way to deal with that. So I said to this girl, listen, but please promise me if it gets hard, you're going to pop your pill. Do not throw the pills away. Okay? And so I invited this girl to start doing what I had been led to tell her to consider doing. And I'll never forget the message I got on my telephone. An iMessage at 3 a.m. I was sleeping. I didn't get it until the next morning, right? She says, Pablo, oh my gosh, I did it, but I hope you're not disappointed. I only managed like 10 seconds, right? And a lot of it was when the panic attack starts to come, just stay present, stay with it, and say these few things to yourself, right? And I said to her, no, the fact that you tried it is huge, right? That's fantastic. Well, it went from 10 seconds to a minute to 3 minutes till eventually this girl didn't have any more panic attacks. They were done. And she wasn't popping pills. That's my work. That's my work, right? When I come into situations that I realize, wow, this is big, I very much engage with the divine within me, and I very much realize I need help, and I am willing to channel whatever is given to me, right? And it's through that channeling that I have seen tremendous things, right? Another story that I think is worth mentioning. I received this email that says to me, you have been highly recommended, and my wife and we need to talk to you, and we need to talk to you today. And I'm like, well, these people obviously think that I'm in Israel, like retracing the steps of Jesus and having beer and cigars while I do that, right? So, so I'm like, okay, I write back and I'm like, well, I know who introduced you. Okay, I can only fit you at the end of my day. I hope that, yeah, that's fine. So we go on the call. I've never met these people. And they're sitting there like two kids, one next to the other, right? Like this. Like they're naughty. They were naughty in school and they're waiting for the principal to see them, right? And I go, hi, how are you? Hi, I'm so-and-so. Hi, I'm so-and-so. I say, yeah, hello. Okay, listen, let's cut to the chase here. This is really simple. Tomorrow morning, we're going to go see the divorce lawyer. So the only way that won't happen is if you say something to convince us different.
No pressure.
Whoa.
Well, exactly. And I've just been working all day. And right now I'm thinking about a beer, a cigar. I'm thinking about relaxing, talking to my wife. I'm not thinking about this. Right? So I said to them, really, this is the premise right now. Yeah, this is where it's at. Can you help us? Now, I remember saying a prayer inside me where I said, God, if you don't help me, I need to hang up because I have nothing for these people. Now, I went on to speak for 45 minutes. As you can see, I don't find it hard to speak, right? I don't remember what I said to these people. But these people are on their third child now, and they're together, right? So obviously, whatever I said got the lawyer canceled, and they're still married today, and they're having their third kid. And this was like 7 years ago. Okay, now again, see, I don't suddenly start getting my papers and my frame. Well, what can I give them? No, I listen to my heart, right? And I listen, I believe, to the voice of the divine that guides me and knows all things. And so therefore I speak, and I trust that whatever I speak will not return without result, that it will accomplish whatever it is that it's supposed to do. That's the difference between my work, right? And that's why also I think I succeeded with players that a lot of other top coaches couldn't, right? Every player I work with went further and further than they had ever been before because I was able to work with them in areas and introduce to them in a way to tennis that they had never actually worked or understood, and that released them to achieve results they never thought they could. I will never forget one of my players saying, Pablo, I am number 7 in the world. Can you believe that? I said, I can see you still don't really believe it very much, but here it is. It was for them, it was like a dream come true. So I believe in the potential that we have been given within our hearts. I believe in that, right? I know it. I've seen what is done in my life and in the life of others. That's what I believe stands me apart from the regular life coach, counselor type of role, right?
You just alluded to this, and you've talked to both. I know both Marisa and I, because we have literally talked about it to each other. So when going back to like having community, for one, just a side note back to that original part of that, I remember when I first started this, I felt like my language started changing. I felt like there was this part of me that I'm like, I don't even know how to talk and communicate. So I needed people. And I was so grateful for people in my life that I could actually process with outside of you and outside of just the world, because it literally felt like I was like, what's happening? I feel like everything is shifting and changing. And then when Marisa started working with, that's like literally how you and I started talking really even more on Marco Polo. It was just like, we're just processing this shit out. Like what's happening. We're just talking and navigating, because it's like you can feel a little bit like you're on an island. And also at the same time, you mentioned staying in your lane and living in your potential, and that you saw potential in that player, but you also see potential in all of us, but also the opportunity for us to stay in our own lane versus hopping over multiple times because we think we should do something, or we think we should create something that belongs to somebody else's story or emulating what somebody else has done. That, and I know for me, one of the biggest invitations has been the place of like, when you stopped, you invited me versus say you should do something. Because the minute that the should came on, that's where shame was created, right? But when somebody is trying to create something for the sake of somebody else, what would you say to that individual for just what you talked about, the potential in the lane?
Yeah. Look, in life, we are given a blueprint, and the answers for that person's blueprint will never work for yours because you got different questions. The questions on your paper are different than theirs. Right? In school, I'm not going to deny this. I cheated many times in school. I wasn't very good at school. I didn't like school, right? So there were many times where there was a guy called Anthony Bolger. Look, I remember his name, right? Anthony Bolger was a really little kid, and I defended him from the bullies, and in exchange, he would help me with my tests, right? This is when I was back in South America. Now, I could cheat from Anthony Bolger because we had the same paper. We had the same questions. But in life, your paper, my paper, is made up of different questions and answers. So there's no point in me trying to copy, like you say, what someone else is doing, because whatever they're doing is according to their paper, and it won't fit in mine. And normally what will happen is when you try and copy someone else's paper or answers or way, you end up forsaking your own. You end up destroying your own way. You lose your way because you are now beginning to guide your life using a North Star that is different than the one that you were given to use, right? You begin to go into areas where your potential was never designed for it. So your potential, instead of actually blessing your life, begins to destroy your life because you are using it in areas to do things and involve yourself in things that have nothing to do with the platform, the area, right? So for example, a good example of this is, say, for example, I today sell my house, my car, all my valuables, and I say to you, I am quitting this. I am going to go and become a top tennis player. Now, if you watch me play tennis, you would say, holy shit, Pablo, you're good. And I was very good. But my potential was nowhere near what these guys have that you see at Wimbledon and the US. These guys' potential is light years ahead of mine, right? So as a player, I better keep my house, my car, and keep doing what I do because I will never, ever fulfill anything like I can if I stay in tennis, but I'm a coach, right? Now, as a coach, I believe I have more potential than those guys that are players, right? So I was within the arena, but I was in the wrong platform. Whenever I switch as a player to a coach, I became limitless and I was able to do things. Now, if you ask my ego, what would you rather be, a coach or a player? Of course, a player. Why wouldn't I? I mean, have you seen those guys? They earn money, they're rich, famous, whatever. But in my heart of hearts, I knew that playing was not for me, but coaching was. Right? And so for me to try and copy them would only end up sending me bankrupt, not only financially, but also emotionally. I would begin to think that I am somehow not good enough. I'm not as good as they are. They're somehow better than me, right? Somehow I am a lesser man than they are because I can't win like they can. And yet all along, the only reason it's not working is not because I'm lesser or not good enough. Yeah, I'm spending time somewhere I've been told it would be a good idea to spend, but it's not for me. It's not for me. That's their blueprint. That's their plan. That's their paper. Mine is different. And the more we focus on our own lane and what God has created us, the arenas He has brought us into where He wants to express something through our lives to the world. And the less time we spend in trying to knock doors down in our lives just because they look good or they promise to give us a financial gain, the more momentum we will generate in our journey, because we will stick to our lanes. That's what lanes on a highway are there for, to generate momentum, to generate flow, right? In Israel, sometimes they cover over they resurface the road and they don't put the lanes for a month. And suddenly a 3-lane highway becomes a 7-lane highway, and there's traffic and there's accidents. Why? Because the lanes are supposed to give us the ability to flow, right? And when we are flowing on the highway, we focus on our lane. We're not looking at everybody else and what they're doing. We are going on our own. So I think that's a little bit of what I would say to somebody that suddenly becomes enamored with what it might look like for somebody else, right? A lot of the times we fall in love with the way life looks for someone else, but we don't really know the journey that we're on. And often, a lot of times, people are very economical with telling us only the positive, the highlights, the peak experiences they've had, but they conveniently live the in-between valleys they got to go through, right? And so they enamor you with an illusion that is not real to try and create results that were never really meant to be part of your journey.
I mean, I know that you, have spoken into, like Sarah said, both of us about finding your lane. And so when you're in that lane, though, too, there comes other challenges of just figuring out how to anchor to what's happening in this moment, in the presence, instead of obsessing over what could happen in the future, what we want to try and cultivate to happen in the future. And this gentle balance between obviously having dreams or having objectives for our lives versus like having goals or having needs or having obsessions about specific outcomes. How does the shift to being more present in the moment and actually experiencing and enjoying the life that you are given in the here and now actually help to create a more fulfilled outcome that we are not trying to hold tightly to, but because we're in that lane, we're flowing, we're rolling.
Well, you're giving all the answers now. What can I say? You've just given all the answers away. It's like, I'm trying to think, okay, I'll talk about that. Well, there she goes. She says that. Well, okay, she says that.
All right, I'll shut up. You know what I'm trying to ask you. And you
I mean, yeah, but I mean, that's a brilliant way to ask and give the answer at the same time. I love it. I'm proud of you. Look, we can live our lives in 3 places. Either we live trying to control and force and manipulate our lives, or we can live in a place called resignation, where it is also a form of control, but instead of trying to force life to happen, we prevent it from happening, right? And then in between those two, there is this place called, if you like, active surrender, right? Which is basically living present and responding to what comes your way in front of you as you are required and led to do so, and not using the opportunity to bargain something of value in your life in order to achieve the results that you think you need to, right? So that your life is worth living, and often so that you can create a future that redeems the past that you're so embarrassed and ashamed of, basically. Right? Okay? And so essentially the way that you are able to become present is you hold your life loosely. Right? And so you are allowing life to flow through you as opposed to holding it tight. When you hold tight, you cannot allow anything to flow out, and you cannot allow anything new to flow in. And that's why most people spend their lives from control to resignation, right? So they try really hard. There's a lot of action in their lives, but there's no momentum. Eventually, living like that is exhausting. So they resign themselves. They begin to feel sorry for themselves, right? And so basically they spend time here preventing life from happening to them because they are now the victim. They spend a little bit of time here. They get a little bit of energy back. They go back again and they try. Now, every time you go through the middle, you do sense there is something else in your life and a different place you could be living from, but you're never really there long enough to understand what it is. Now, if you think about a plumb line, if you screw around with a plumb line, right, the plumb line will be going from side to side and we're doing. But if you just let it be, eventually that plumb line will be balanced and aligned with the center. And that's the concept of holding on loosely. When you loosen your grip over the life that you think you're supposed to have, or the person that you think you're supposed to be, and you begin to welcome life in the way it was created for you, and you begin to do your work and you begin to heal, you begin to spend more time present because you're no longer crowded by the anxiety and the fear of missing out, because you realize life is not something I need to control, manipulate, and force. Life is something that is received. God wants to give me my life. He wants me to enjoy my life. He wants me to be happy, to be peaceful, to be fulfilled. But to find these things not in how well I do or I don't do, but in who I am and within myself. Right? And so when life now happens, you realize life happens for me, not to me. Right? And you realize that every single thing that happens is an opportunity to further understand who you are, who God is, but also what it is that your life is about and what are the arenas that you've been invited to contribute to this thing called, the dance that we're all in since the beginning of time.
One of our favorite analogies.
Well, it works. It works. In the tennis court, holding on loosely is you focus on the ball that is in front of you. Because one of the things that a lot of players do is they remember the point they just lost, and they start to become afraid that if they lose this point, what it will be the score that is coming. So they are in the past to try and control, and so basically they're playing not to lose, and they're crowded by fear. And so they're never able to fully play and express their talent. Holding it loosely means you play. You don't play to win, and you don't play to try and not lose. You play. And when you play like that, normally your talent is fully present, right? Your ability is fully present, and 9 out of 10 times, you win the matches you play.
I mean, it sounds so good, right? I mean, it's, I say that because it's like literally I think all of us want that. I think that's like, I know that I want it, and I want it to be something that is so rich and vibrant for my life. And also, like, I love how you've talked about the ego, that it's not something just to like shove to the complete abyss that you don't integrate with it. Because I feel like a lot of people that we have been around with that type of stuff, it's like your ego is not something that you even want active in your life. But at the end of the day, it's like the ego is still can be incredibly useful because it gives you such a mirror, and it gives you this beautiful opportunity to see what it is that you're getting invited
and one of the best ways to uncover who you are is by understanding that what the ego is trying to project, right? So when you understand, why is it that the ego wants me to be powerful, and and so that's what helped me to understand with very good clarity what the wounding was about in my life and why I saw life the way I did, and that's why I tried to manipulate life in the way that I did. In life, listen, when we don't understand this concept, we change our partners, we change our clothes, we change where we live, we change what we do, we change what we eat, we change our work, but we never change ourselves, right? Because ultimately changing yourself is not something people believe is possible, right? And a lot of us, the problem is we live the consequences of a life that is not ours. And that's one of the biggest tragedies in life. A person that comes to the end of their lives and they realize they're going to the grave having lived a life that wasn't for them. Okay? And that, God forbid, any of us have to experience that moment. Right? Because there is nothing you can do about it. It's done.
Yeah, it's true.
So I want to provide a space, Pablo, too, because life has continued to unfold for you in the work that you do. And I want you to tell our audience about your new space. You alluded to this title before, Getting in the Zone. Yeah. And now we have this beautiful outpouring of your work and your heart in the community and are reaching a broader number of people versus also the one-on-one coaching that you do. So can you speak a little bit into the Zone space and how people can connect with you?
Yeah, so for like 7 years, Sarah was nudging me. Well, not nudging me. She was kicking me, telling me, Pablo, you need to do courses. You need to do all these things. You should set up a community. People want to talk to you, want to spend time with you. I want to be with you more than my session, blah, 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 blah. So I was like, well, Sarah, I really love your commitment to me and how you want me to, but I just don't feel aligned with that right now, right? I feel like the work I'm doing with you and people like you, this is where it's at for me. And I obviously had some retreats that I used to run here in Israel, but between Corona and the war that we've been through, obviously those at the moment are not functioning. But at the beginning of this year, I felt a nudge in my heart that finally aligned with what Sarah had been, pushing me and trying to get me to do for so long. And so essentially, I felt invited to put together a set of courses that are designed to obviously help people initiate the journey that we've been talking about, right? Where they begin to obviously do the work of the heart and they begin to uncover their true self and obviously understand who they are not, but they think they are, right? That is causing the great pain and trouble that they experience in their life, which you alluded to. Then obviously, because we don't want just people to do their work, like you said, it's very, very important to know that you're accompanied. I've started a community, an online community, where essentially if you do the first course, you have free access for the lifetime to the community. And in the community, it's basically made up of people that are in a similar journey, that are being vulnerable, and they're sharing their lives, they're sharing their hearts, they're sharing their dark sides, they're sharing their wounds. And obviously, when we do that, it becomes obviously safer for all of us to process and to function together. And obviously, we encourage one another, right? And we synergize one another to find what often you find on a one-on-one capacity. And then, of course, I'm still doing the one-on-one coaching, and then obviously I've opened it up as well to start working with businesses. And I work with a lot of CEOs, and the CEOs have often, like you, hey man, do you go to businesses? Do you talk to people? Do you work with teams? And as I used to say no, now I've obviously said yes. And so that is something else that I've also opened up, because of course, as a coach in tennis, I was also, managing teams, right? I had the physical trainer, I had this, the nutritionist, I had the physio, and I had other people that were involved with the player, and it was my job as the leader to coordinate all of that and make sure that we stayed on song, and obviously we worked together, and obviously flowed together. So this is what I'm doing now. You guys can give them my website.
Yeah.
We are now on our second course, the Sacred Inner Dance, and it's basically an interactive course. It lasts 16 weeks, and we get together every 2 weeks for a couple of hours, and then there's a lot of work that people do in between, which I am very happy to say is producing some amazing, amazing results and transformations in people's lives. So yeah.
Well, we would have no doubt. None at all.
You're very kind, Marisa.
No, I really want, well, I have no control over how people receive this, right? But I
Yes.
truly pray and wish that people get to hear this interview and hear a piece of you, because it's one thing for us to share about our journeys or share about the transformation
Yeah.
we've had with you. But I'm just so excited for our listeners to also hear directly from you and hear your heart and hear your fire for this work that you do, because
Yeah.
it was that really, I mean, even for me, like, and part of the reason why I asked that question earlier is just, yeah, you can do all the self-development, you can do all the self-help stuff.
Yeah.
But again, most of the time when we're doing those things, we're learning from others what they have done, and then trying to adapt that within our own life. And that can be really helpful in starting conversations. But your
Yes.
gratitude journal isn't going to dive you into what is hurting, what is the wounding, or what you're blind to. It points an eye to what you're grateful for, but it doesn't always point the eye to what the wounding is. And so reading books and doing all this stuff is great, but it is such a gift to have someone else to walk you through that space and to start to help you understand more of that. And
Yeah.
I'm just so grateful that you were here with us today, and that our audience got a very, very tiny, but wonderful and impactful snippet of who you are and what you do bring to this world, because it is incredible. And we're just so grateful for you. And I'm grateful for you and the transformation of my own life and the life of those around me, and how I lead myself now, which in fact more positively impacts others from that raw, authentic space.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of this work. When this work is done the way that it was created to be done, right? What happens is those around you begin to also change, because they begin to get impacted by the change of energy and vibration in your heart, right? As you begin to heal. And the amount of times that I have seen husbands, wives, parents suddenly call me and say, "Hey, Pablo, I've seen this dramatic change in my son, my wife, my husband. Can you work with me too, please? I need to change. I can't keep living like this." And so sometimes the best investment you can make for yourself and those you love is do your work.
100%.
Do your work.
Well, I think that's the beautiful invitation, and we so appreciate you taking time out of your day. And I know it's evening there for you, so we adore you. And obviously,
I adore you guys too. You know that.
We'll put all your information in the show notes. And thank you for spending your day with us.
Go enjoy
It's
your
been
cigar and beer.
a pleasure. Well, actually, I got one more session, and then I will enjoy my cigar and my
There you
bourbon.
go. So thank you for joining us on another episode of the Heartwork Podcast. We hope today's conversation has inspired you to lead with heart in your business and life.
If you enjoyed this, subscribe so you never miss a release, rate our show, leave us a review, get on our VIP email list, and join our exclusive Facebook group, The Heartwork Life, to plug into our community and learn from us and other heart-led entrepreneurs on a weekly basis.
We look forward to chatting with you next time.
Bye!